Welcome to FS-ISAC's podcast, Spin Cyber Today. I'm Elizabeth Heathfield, Chief Communications Officer at FS-ISAC. We're recording here at the America's Spring Summit in Denver and taking the opportunity we have with so many of our community to being here in one place to talk about a whole range of topics. In this episode, we chat with Bashar Abouseido, CISO of asset management giant Charles Schwab, about a topic everybody's been talking about, Chat GPT and AI and their impact on cybersecurity. Thank you so much for being here, Bashar. I really appreciate you taking the time. So we're here to talk about Chat GPT and the security implications of it. So let's just start with the basics. Talk about, generative language models and their evolution and, when they became interesting to you.
Yeah, it's really, well, thank you for having me here today, Elizabeth. And I think it's a fascinating topic. So I've been very interested in the space since 2017. We've been kind of doing research, seeing how this potential, that I think it's phenomenal, because we're getting into a space in cybersecurity in particular. And I was very selfish when I looked at this, saying, hey, listen, I can't have enough talent. I'm having a hard time finding people to do all this work. There's just massive amount of work. How can I leverage a machine to allow me to do more, to focus those special talented people to work on the big challenges versus trying to do everything? Because even if I wanted to, I could not find enough people to do all this work. And I was fascinated by the application of the technology. So there's a lot that we can do with it. I love the technology and the capability, because it moves us from a place where we're used to leveraging data, but we have had a static approach to it, meaning we put rules, and if those rules were met, then we were able to make a decision. Now, the fascinating part is that in cyber, every time the bad guys have figured out the rules, they reverse engineered it, and they try to get under the rules and around the rules, and they continue to find success. So I figured, if we can find a technology that allows us to take the data, follow the themes in the data, make decisions or help us make decisions in response as much of a real time as possible at times, it will allow us to be unpredictable and make better decisions that will make it very difficult for the bad guys to do things. But that's how I looked at it, how we started thinking there's a lot into this. But now you're getting natural language processing, you're getting into this generative AI, and people are getting exposed to how fascinating and the potential is unlimited.
So let's just talk about a little bit, just for those who don't know, what is Chat GPT? What is it actually doing in simple, plain English?
What it's doing, basically, it's leveraging the science of machine learning and AI to look at data, finding interesting relationship between the data, which we call a clustering of data. And then it is able to continue to learn, to understand that relationship between the different data elements that it has, which what we call the deep learning, continuously kind of taking data and trying to make better connection between the data. Add to it the science of neural network, which mimic the cells of the brain. And now you're able to take that, in addition to natural language processing, we're able to come back with very thoughtful response that mimics the human brain, which is really fascinating, because if the answers we're getting from a Chat GPT or Bard or DALL-E are not really very strong, very good, very believable, high quality, we would be dismissing this technology outright. And it's conversational. People love it because I don't have to learn a new language. I'm just speaking to it with the language that I know. Yeah. And it's responding with a high quality answers. And we love it. The question is it 100% accurate?
So, of course, Chat GPT 4 has just come out. Have you noticed a difference in the quality versus Chat GPT 3 in terms of what you can actually get out of it?
I think they've done a lot of, the people running this have done a tremendous job, in my opinion, of not only making it very valuable. The value proposition is great, but they started to even improve the overall technology to allow you to add more context. Because where the AI and machine learning struggled, because it looks at the set of data, and for Chat GPT and OpenAI, they looked at a large set of data that is available on the internet and start to make kind of connection between the data points based on the topic that you're requesting. But in this newer version, they added more context to specific areas, meaning they started adding more context to music, meaning the author, some other information related to allow you to interpret the data better and create something more meaningful. And actually, if you read books about AI and machine learning, when they did studies with people and they showed them a music note that was created by a human and one was created and generated by a machine, and they said, which one do you think is more authentic? 85% of the people chose the machine one as more authentic music note that they thought was created by a human. Not only that, when they read articles, 2 articles, one was written by an individual, one was generated by a Chat GPT-like, and 80 to 90% of the respondents said that one written by the machine was the good article that was written by the human. Meaning the quality can be fantastic if it's applied in the right way, and if we're able to understand the risks associated with it. So they added context to music, they added context to not only to music, but they added it to images. So we're able to kind of understand the context of the image, where it's coming from, what is it trying to do, and things of that nature. So you end up creating a better outcome, better output. And they also linked it in a way to allow you to also go to our website. So if you think the context is coming from a website, you can give it a URL. And so I'm not an expert, obviously, in all of it, but it's just fascinating. The progression and the ability to integrate with various different technologies, whether it's search, customer service, other things, it's unlimited.
So let's talk about how it's already being applied from a business perspective first, then we'll get to cyber, in the financial sector.
Well, I don't know. I think many people are experimenting with different ways of how do we leverage this technology, and I think it's a wide open research topic. Some people are looking at it saying, well, if it can do this stuff, can it answer many of the questions we get from a customer service perspective? And I'm not talking here about Schwab or any specific company. I'm just saying financial services in general, looking at that. The insurance industry is looking at it saying, hey, can it generate better models versus the financial models that we have, right? Because most of the models that they have is based on good data, but it has rules. The majority of the financial models we have in the industry are based on rules. This is based on data. So is it going to generate better outcomes for them? We don't know. So, and so on and so forth. There are so many areas within our applications and digital transaction where it can be used. But the key here is you can't make those decisions in vacuum based on the value without thinking about the risk and the impact. And the risk and the impact has been highlighted quite a bit in the past through regulatory mandates, as well risk management practices of how to look at that risk.
At the high level, let's just start there. What are the risks at the high level of this technology and incorporating it into your business operations?
Yeah, fair enough. And if you look at it, there are multiple risks that you have to be aware of before you start using it beyond the personal kind of, I'm just checking it out and I want to learn more what it does. But we've seen some of that behavior in technology. If you look at GitHub, people want to get feedback on snippets of their code. Is it good code? How do I solve this? How do I solve that? Chat GPT and other like technologies are good at looking in the back mirror, looking at the wealth of knowledge that was accumulated and giving you what it thought was the best answer. And it's very effective at doing that. But here's the risk, right? The risk from a security perspective is that now you're starting to, from a data leakage prevention, you're starting to load private data that shouldn't really make it like your full source code, or you're loading up your documents. And here's the thing, just like we tell teenagers and young people, once something goes on the internet, there's no going back and erasing. So be careful what you say publicly in chats, videos, pictures, right? Same thing here with Chat GPT. Once it goes into the public baseline, if you read what you're agreeing to, Now that part of that baseline, as soon as you add a private document to it or a set of data that is private to the company, now it becomes part of
the training data, right?
So if I give it a pricing sheet and I ask for company X, it's going to come back and says company X has the following prices. If you thought that was private and you put it in Chat GPT, now it's becoming public. Now, unless you have a different arrangement where you have private data set, private training models, and separation between public knowledge baseline and what you do, you have to be always careful. And people don't understand that. Once you put something into Chat GPT, it becomes part of the knowledge baseline that it draws from to answer questions for everybody. Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So that's one risk. Yeah. Privacy risk is another if you have MPI data. Mm-hmm. The third risk is IP. Now, once you put IP out there and ChatGPT takes that IP and start answering questions, revealing your IP to others, that's an IP risk for you. The regulatory risk associated with things, because with the Dodd-Frank Act, the governance around model risk, because all financial institutions, insurance, other companies and whatnot, they all use models, financial models to do things. That particular risk is being managed very carefully through the Dodd-Frank Act, and you have to register the model, you have to test the models for biases, make sure that the decisions made based on those models are appropriate and accurate. We don't know the biases yet in the data that is given to the model with ChatGPT. And once you make a decision, now that becomes a critical risk from a regulatory perspective because it's impacting customers. So who gets the accountability for that decision? Who makes that decision? And what's the model like? Can you show us the model to make sure that we don't have any biases within the model so it's fair? With the science in general, the machine may be making the right decision based on the data it has, but without context. But if you look at the context, now is it impacting groups of people? Is it impacting certain ethnic groups, certain categories of the society, where it just does not know? It's just looking at the data without context. Right. That's why I said the initial use of it is interesting and helpful to accelerate ideas and progress. But we need to start thinking when to take that data, and when we make decisions, what does that mean? How much risk are we taking when we do it?
Other risks?
I think there are other risks. Again, I covered it quite a bit. To me, my main concern on cybersecurity risk is related to the prevention or leakage of data and the IP risk and the challenges associated with that with privacy. But there are other risks, and you can ask ChatGPT, what are the risks that you provide? It will give you a nice 7-point kind of very clear explanation of the risks associated with using it.
What about threats? How does ChatGPT actually enable and accelerate the evolution of cyber threats?
Great question. So here's how I think about this. I think AI and machine learning, especially natural generative AI and natural language processing, its impact around the acceleration, the key word that you said is accelerating, meaning instead of starting from scratch, nothing, can give me something really good to consider to build on. But it doesn't mean I take it and make decisions based on it. I take it as a baseline to start looking into it and look what it can do. Now, the interesting part is, like I said, the knowledge base is all about looking at the rear view mirror, right? You're looking at the knowledge that is already published, right? So what it's going to accelerate from a threat perspective is that the bad guys are able to learn about previous threats and how to leverage them a lot faster. They don't have to do their own research. ChatGPT can tell them, hey, we were able to hack this using this type of exploit and this using that, and here's the code they used and whatnot, because all of that is public knowledge. But then in the past, you needed to go learn and get trained and whatnot. That will be accelerated by ChatGPT. But what I don't think ChatGPT and like services and capabilities will do, Elizabeth, is that it will create a new exploit for you. It's not going to yet replace a human brain, meaning it can tell you about the knowledge that has already been established, but will it create new knowledge? Some people say it will eventually. And I challenge that and I say I have not seen an evidence that it is able to make decision or create new data points to make decisions of the future. Meaning, if you ask Chat GPT about the future, it tells you, I can't predict the future. I don't know what to do about that. So how can I predict that something that will be a significant threat if that threat didn't exist before? Does that make sense? So acceleration is a major issue because it will make it a lot easier for the bad guys to get up to speed and not spend and waste so much time trying to get up to speed. But once they get up to speed, is it going to be able to come up with new methods, new ideas? I don't think that's the case.
Well, I mean, it's essentially the same thing as what we're saying the opportunity is on the defense side, right? Which is it frees you up from all the rudimentary stuff, right? And enables you to spend your time thinking more creatively. Well, it also does that for the cyber criminal,
I agree
right?
with you more because I think we should leverage it to help us write code and learn from these things so we can do better. The question is, are there any other ways we can leverage the technology to also replace some of the technologies we have? I think we can, but I also think AI and machine learning is just not the generative AI and the natural language processing of just using standard language, English, conversational. I think we can use it to start looking at data and telling us what the data is saying, meaning you give it access to an area where you have a wealth of signals and data. It can start making conclusions and things that the human eye is not able or capable of seeing at the speed by which it does it in terms of scale. And that to me is phenomenal, right? I am able to be dynamically applying new policies based on the threat environment and what people are doing without necessarily focusing on one thing or two. Today, I have a set of controls that are binary. They work or they don't work. And each one is designed for a specific set of threats and risks. But what if I have something new, like a new vulnerability, like a 0-day that I haven't seen before? Using AI and using the data will tell you immediately, and if you add to it the brain kind of approach to it, which is neural networks, I am able to make on the fly a decision that this is a bad thing. I should not let it go. And the probability of it is like 95%. Would you make that decision? I would.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, I'm sure you saw the AlphaGo documentary a couple of years ago. It kind of reminds me of when that point where AlphaGo started doing moves that nobody had ever seen before, and everybody was like, there's no way that this could possibly work. And then he won, right? And it just took all the experts completely by surprise because it was looking at the data and making a completely different decision because it saw a different pattern than anybody else, a human had
seen. I couldn't agree with you more because the machine is able to find the pattern, the clustering of the events that logically make sense from a machine. Now, there is an unsupervised learning and there is a supervised learning. If you supervise the learning process into deep learning where you continually improve and you're able to check to see the level of accuracy of the output and the outcome that you're generating, to me, I just had this conversation with a few kind of my peers, and I said, how come if you go on a commercial plane, it's funny that you're saying that. I was, one of the X-Force pilots was flying next to me on a Midwest trip, and I said, hey, Brad, I'm so glad you're next to me. I feel so, safe that you're. He said, well, I'm sorry to tell you, I really don't do much. It's really difficult job to be a commercial pilot because all the decisions are being made by a model within the computer. The only thing we do is take off and land and supervise the model throughout the trip. But for the most part, we rarely do anything other than just avoid turbulence. He said the plane is flown completely by a machine. Wow. If you think of Tesla and automated driving, the same thing. But the question here is, if you decide to make decisions based on AI and machine learning, which is dynamic, it gets the signals and makes decisions based on what they thought was good, who is going to be accountable for that decision? Like if you have an accident while you're driving a Tesla and it's autopilot, who's at fault? Is it you that enabled the machine to make those decisions, or is it somebody else? Who's accountable for that? Same thing when you fly. You let the plane fly because you think it's a lot safer than the manual decisions we make because the machine can process things a lot faster. Who gets to make that decision? Who gets the accountability and the liability associated with it? Those are all interesting questions. I don't have an answer, That's fascinating because I think machines can do more.
How are you dealing with those questions now? You know, I mean, you obviously have some level of, AI and machine learning that you're, looking at for behavioral patterns and things like that. Where does the point, is it that every decision that actually gets made needs to be checked by a human? Like, where is the point now where the human needs to get involved, and where do you think that's going to go? Like, do you think that pendulum will swing?
I think it will swing more toward automation and more toward critical decision-making processes. Eventually, once you have a trust around the model and you have a way to manage the risk associated with the model. So I am a big fan of model risk management. All these models need to be registered, looked at independently and tested, and looking at the decisions that they make. But then there's a natural progression that you need to go through. First, you put it as an advisory kind of model, a model that looks at the data and spits out kind of interesting results to say, hey, listen, here's what I'm seeing, investigate. You can investigate that. But as you have more trust and faith in the model and the accuracy, and it's telling you all things that are actually true, you start thinking, well, why can I move this into the critical path? If I move it in the critical path, is my model accurate enough that it doesn't have biases and I can rely on it to make a real-time decision for us that reflects what we want? But do I also have an override mechanism? Because what you don't want is what happened, and I don't know if it's an accurate kind of explanation or what happened with the Max, Boeing Max and whatnot, where the pilot thought, hey, listen, we should be going up. And the machine said, no, we should be going down. And then the fact that they couldn't override the machine, it crashed. Yeah. We don't want those situations, but that's always the risk associated with allowing machines to make decisions, but they're going to be a lot more efficient when they make those decisions. They're going to make it faster, they will make it at scale, and they will make it real time almost. If we get to that point, but we can manage that risk, it would be a phenomenal place to be. But I don't know when that will happen. But that's why this whole field, Elizabeth, is so fascinating and it's so interesting, because sometimes we're just not efficient, especially in cybersecurity. We layer controls after control after control. And I always say it, I almost kind of like somebody having a house. Every time there's a robbery, they add another lock at the door, and you look at their door after like 2 years of living in the house, there's 25 of them. It's like, okay, well, which one does the heavy lifting? It's like, I don't know, but if I lock them all, I feel safe. But that's not very efficient. That's not commercially reasonable to continue to do as we continue to rely more on digital transformation and digital transactions and computers to do everything. Got to think different. Can I be a bit more surgical in my decision makings where I get better user experience, more commercially reasonable approach to managing risk, not having to just kind of endlessly layer technologies that are just increasingly becoming super expensive.
Right. So clearly we're at the very beginning here. Is there, I mean, it's fascinating, and I think you're very optimistic but clear-eyed about it. Is there a possibility, or what is the probability, or what is the chance that this whole thing goes horribly awry?
Well, if we don't manage risk, always that swan event happen, and we all know it, whether it's financial market, other things. Who would have thought that we will have a global pandemic, right? And even when people suggested it, we thought, hey, come on, seriously, we haven't seen that before. But that's really what we need to worry about, is managing that risk really carefully. We need to think not only of the potential, but the level of controls that we have. I know NIST, for example, published a set of 72 controls or something to be considered around the capability. But we need to also go back from a business perspective, evaluate that risk, and start demanding that we do better governance around that risk and better ways to manage it and mitigate it, so we don't end up in a place where that risk or that unlikely risk materializes, manifests itself in a big, major decision, and it creates more harm than good. And that's what we need to be careful with.
Before we started, I put the questions that I was going to ask you into Chat GPT just to see what I would get. I think your answers were a lot more insightful.
Well, you can see that I've been fascinating by the topic for a while. We've invested heavily in the topic to make sure that we help scale our capabilities. And again, the talent shortage is what my basic main concern was. It's like, I can't process all this stuff. What do we do? There are no humans available on the marketplace with the right talent to come in and do all this work. So we have to use machine to scale. The other part that I discussed, and we can maybe talk about this, is that I wanted a situational variability type of approach to cyber. And I hated the static approach. I hated that, okay, here's how I do things. If they get around it, it is what it is. I think we can do better, right? If a car is moving, taking the signals and saying, okay, I have an object, I have to slow down. Why can I do the same when I have an object coming my way, malicious code coming in, or that attacking certain aspect of my platform? Maybe that's the area where I need to strengthen my policy and add more stringent controls. And when they go away, just go back to normal. But we're not. Either we're 100% on that mode or we're not. That's typically the cybersecurity approach to things. It's a binary, yes or no. And maybe every once in a while I'll look at changing things. So that will give us that situational variability, leverage machine more, in addition to the great things from a business perspective, which is acceleration, co-authoring, blank sheet. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
So give me like short, medium, and long-term future of how these models, these technologies are going to change cybersecurity.
I think in the beginning, the main approach from the cybersecurity, just like it is with non-cybersecurity, is acceleration. It will help us accelerate the things that we do typically in a manual way. It will help us get there in an elegant way that we didn't have before without having to do the significant research that we did in the past. So it will be the idea of co-authoring with us, new stuff that we're generating, new widgets and new work that we do is fantastic. Helping us with the blank sheet kind of approach to things when we're starting something new. It will help cybersecurity in the same way. If we are thinking of how do I look at certain code to do something and somebody else did it before, it will generate it for us. And we can start off of that and start really building off of that. That helps me tremendously from scale, economics of not only scale, but efficiency and everything else, right? The question is, can Chat GPT or like services create a full functioning software end to end? I have not seen that. We don't think it can. But can it create bits and pieces that allows us to start? I think it applies to cybersecurity just like it applies to any other technology space, and that would be fantastic. So in that regard, I think that the short term right now is we're learning what machines can do and in what variety of different ways. If it can help you add a Excel spreadsheet function or add it to many of the services that you have, why not have this technology instead of picking up the phone or spending 7 hours trying to figure it out yourself how to do a function in Excel? I think what Microsoft and other technology companies are doing of embedding that is going to make our life much easier and a lot easier for us in terms of barrier to using that technology by leveraging the natural language processing. The question is, long term, can we move past the conversational into more specific data sets that attacks business problems that are specific to a firm or a company or a situation that is not public knowledge? I think there are some direction to go there. How do we run our own models under the same? How do we separate public versus private usage of it? How can we control that risk? But then the other aspect, in my opinion, is can we use the science to start making decisions that are too hard for humans to make quickly and instantaneously when you look at large data sets? I think we can, and we will. And the concept of self-healing will become significantly more possible once we leverage AI and machine learning at a larger scale and wider scale. It doesn't have to be generative AI the way we have it with Chat GPT and Bard and others. But I think we can advance it a lot more, either through embedding some of these capabilities or creating our own capabilities to make those.
When you say self-healing, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I think of self-healing, so when I say I need to have more situational variability, meaning I can't be static. If I'm static, then people will figure me out. And here's how he defends, or the group defend themselves, and this is how we're going to do things. So they figure ways to get around it. Now, if I'm learning on the fly and generating positions, I can start taking action based on the data that I'm seeing. I say, okay, a website is getting attacked through a bot. Maybe I put a bot detection automatically within seconds in front of that application. That's self-healing. Right. Now you protected it, machine protected it without human interaction. We saw that it was attacked. We moved that capability in front of it. We're done. Today, either you have the capability and it stays there the whole time, or you don't have it. It's binary, yes and no. But if we start thinking of that situational variability, AI models can move capabilities based on where your weaknesses are and who's attacking. So it is self-healing.
Yeah.
Correct?
Gosh, that's fascinating. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. But is there any last thing you want to say? Maybe some thoughts or advice for your fellow CISOs as they embark on the journey to start integrating these technologies into their programs?
I think what's important is that we assess the capability and the risks associated with it. We don't want to prevent people from using it. There are many very good use cases for it, but we have to be aware of the risks associated with it, and we have to be able to communicate that internally. So if you decide you're okay with that risk and that your risk appetite is you're comfortable within that risk appetite to actually use it, and you rely on the decisions people make of not basically taking on those risks, then maybe you're fine. Some people said that maybe we pause and we assess, and based on that assessment, we'll make better decisions around what's okay, what's not, and maybe we move with it as on an exception basis for the people that know exactly what they want to do with it. And sometimes people will go saying, you know what, based on the risks that I have, the risk appetite and my business model, I want it open-ended. I want to leverage it across the board. What you can control is the fact that technology companies will continue to embed that capability, so it's not going to be a choice in many areas, but you need to be kind of prepared to address those risks as this becomes more common.
Great. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. And I hope to have you back another time. We can talk in a year about where things have gone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for having me. That was really fun. And it's a really fascinating topic. So we'll continue to watch it, see where it goes.
Thanks again to Bashar for being our guest on this episode. It was a fascinating conversation. If you like this podcast and want to hear from more FinCyber leaders around the world, subscribe to our podcast at FS-ISAC.com/insights or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you learned something.